What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie, Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Alright, today's video we are going to be talking about 10 of Swords, Chapter 9, Excalibur, number 13 by Tini Howard and R.B. Silva. And in this video, we are going to talk about the return of the Captain Britain Corps. We're also going to be talking about the rift that has come up between Betsy and Brian Braddock, and more importantly, exactly where Her Royal Highness Queen Opal Luna Saturnine has been keeping the Starlight Sword. We're gonna talk about all that and more right now, but first, wash your damn hands and let's hit that intro.
Word to wise, grass only greener when it's fertilized. Gave them truth in these songs, they prefer to lies. Destiny beautiful, adrift in her purple lies. You can't see me, you Stevie, wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
Before we get started, if you want to see more awesome comic book videos like this one, it only takes 2 clicks to become one of Earth's mightiest subscribers. Click.
Now, when we kick off this issue of Excalibur, we see that Jamie and Brian Braddock are traveling to the Starlight Citadel. There are shenanigans to be held, but the thing that I think would stick out most to anybody who's reading this book, but one of the things that kind of stuck out to me on this book, the back and forth between Brian and Betsy Braddock. It is really interesting and a little bit off-putting, but at the same time, I kind of see where Tini Howard is going with this one. You kind of have to go back to Excalibur number 1. We kind of talked about this off and on the channel. I've even done a video about it in the past, but basically as a friendly reminder to anyone, because apparently it's always someone's first video, the thing you need to remember is that in Excalibur number 1, Brian Braddock was being mind controlled by Morgan Le Fay, and during that time period, he gave up the Amulet of Wisdom to Betsy so that there would always be a Captain Britain. And of course, as one would imagine, we all kind of knew this wasn't going to be something that was going to be permanent, or at least a lot of us assumed as much. Betsy being Captain Britain is not really a first, but I mean, it's one of those things that it's kind of always been Brian Braddock, so of course he's probably going to get it back. And what ultimately winds up happening is that when they do get him back, he is given that opportunity to make his choice by Merlin and Roma between the Sword of Might and the Amulet of Wisdom, and those who would become Captain Britain always choose the amulet. They never choose the sword. If you choose the sword, you are considered to have failed the test. And this time, even though in the past he famously chose the amulet, in this case something happened. It wouldn't be out of pocket for someone to assume that Jamie Braddock is the reason why he was brought back incorrectly using his reality warping powers, leaving out that part of himself that would have chose the amulet. But in truth, it was actually Morgan Le Fay who destroyed that part of himself. Jamie just brought back what was already there. Now, to be fair, Jamie Braddock has the power to probably give that part of himself back, but he just won't, or hasn't, or who knows. But since then, as you see throughout this issue, Brian is uncomfortable with the idea of wielding the Sword of Might. He doesn't want to. He doesn't want to have anything to do with it because he doesn't know the sword. He doesn't know what it's going to turn him into, and he just doesn't want to take any chances. He's been, for the most part, ashamed of this sword. He even had Betsy hide the sword away, and then somewhere along the road, I'm assuming she gave it back to him. But at the end of it all, Saturnine does not want Betsy to be Captain Britain. She never has. She doesn't like her. She doesn't want her to be Captain Britain. She doesn't think a mutant should be Captain Britain, more importantly, and by all accounts and purposes, she wants Brian Braddock restored as the one true Captain Britain. She also wants some other things too. She makes it fairly obvious that she wants Brian Braddock to clap those cheeks sideways, upside down, and inside out. Basically,
park that Big Mac truck right in this little garage.
She is trying to get Brian Braddock hip to that otherworld wop. But at the end of it all, we got to remember, Brian Braddock is a married man, and we all know men don't cheat.
Message!
Throughout all this, Brian wants to be Captain Britain again. That's what he desires. And even though Betsy didn't want to be Captain Britain in the beginning, she's kind of grown into it, and we kind of see Betsy acting in a way that, I don't really enjoy. Like, sometimes it's easy to forget that Betsy kind of used to be a bit of a boring, white bread, just incredibly milquetoast character back in the day, and now I'm starting to be reminded of those things, and she's kind of acting like a petulant child throughout a lot of this issue in regard regards to how she feels about Brian wanting to be Captain Britain again and how she doesn't want to lose it. Attacking him with her psychic sword out of nowhere, trying to force him to use the Sword of Might, and just, I don't know, man, I'm not gonna lie. And a lot of narrative choices I would have went with. I don't know, I feel like this was not the best way to paint Betsy Braddock. But where things get weird is in regards to Jamie Braddock, who during the night, while sleeping in the Starlight Citadel and probably dreaming of what he wants to do to her royal highness, Queen Opal Luna Saturnine, he is attacked by the Captain Britain Corps. And this is a Captain Britain Corps that is incredibly unusual. They were birthed from one of Jamie's meddlings with reality. Just a few issues back in Excalibur number 10, it just so happened that he created this entirely split off reality from the one that we currently know. And the interesting part about his abilities is that whenever Jamie Braddock, who is by all accounts an Omega level reality warping mutant, when he warps reality, he creates rifts and these ripple effects, which basically make this whatever new reality he's made, kind of makes it become a divergent reality from the one that he currently resides in, whatever the base reality is. And the home base reality usually is never aware of anything that is ever changed. And the new reality creates this backlog of memories and ideas and history to basically justify its own existence. It's one of those things that is, even though a lot of people like to talk about Franklin Richards and how powerful he is as a reality warper, but I think a lot of people sleep on Jamie Braddock as being like one of the most powerful reality warpers in existence, because not many people who are reality warpers can literally cause a reality to come up with ways to justify its own existence. We even talked about this very recently when I talked about the Daredevil Annual number 1, how the Inhuman character Reader, who technically is a reality warper because whatever he reads becomes reality, even he couldn't create, even in his most powerful, couldn't create a version of Mike Murdoch that actually had memories that were completely his own. Mike had to use a Norn Stone to do that. So yeah, this is kind of a big deal. I think a lot of people are going to kind of snooze on this little nugget, but I do remember a lot of people's biggest concern with Excalibur was when the Captain Britain Corps, this reality warped version of it created by Jamie Braddock, was introduced. They kind of seemed to just disappear out of nowhere and were never addressed again. Well, they have returned, and the very creation of this Captain Britain Corps had already raised the ire of Saturnine. And for whatever reason, in issue number 10, when they were officially addressed as the Captain Britain Corps, in the very next issue, it was almost as if they weren't created at all. The comic just kind of went on its own way and started, more heading in the direction of Ten of Swords shenanigans. So here they are again, and for whatever reason, they want to kill Jamie Braddock. And of course, with Brian and Betsy running to his rescue, which we must remember, he doesn't need rescuing. He is a reality warping mutant who is quite imaginative in his abilities. It's one of those things where a lot of people usually just assume that reality warpers are the most powerful beings on Earth and thus cannot be defeated in any way, shape, form, or fashion. But I have always lived by the thought that just because you can change reality doesn't mean you can actually fight. And if someone's smart enough, or at least ingenious enough, you can be defeated. That said, Jamie is a bit more robust of a reality warper than your average bear. He is a psionic level reality warper, thus meaning he has psionic powers and he's able to use them to shut down the Captain Britain Corps. He even wields his abilities in such a way to kill one of them, specifically the Jubilee version of Captain Britain. And of course, all this does is upset them, and as they are being chased out of Jamie Braddock's bedchamber, the Gambit version of Captain Britain, he destroys the scabbard that is housing the Sword of Might, using one of his kinetically charged playing cards. And when he does so, it causes Brian to actually wield the sword. You see, Brian has been keeping the sword in that scabbard, held in that sheath, without actually wielding it himself. In the sheath, he cannot become whatever it is he is going to become. And now that that sheath has been destroyed, he has become not the Captain Britain-esque version that we saw back in Excalibur number 6, but he becomes something incredibly different. He becomes Captain Avalon, looking very similar to Captain Britain, his Captain Britain persona, but just, with a different color scheme. There's no Union Jack anywhere on him. Now, Opal Luna Saturnine is not really interested in this. She doesn't want him to be Captain Avalon. She wants him to be Captain Britain, and she doesn't want him wielding the Sword of Might. As far as she is concerned, he should be wielding the Excalibur, or more importantly, the Starlight Sword. What Saturnine intends to do is to strip Betsy Braddock of the Amulet of Wisdom. But when she tries to do so, Betsy shatters the amulet. Now, Saturnine gets a bit bent out of shape when she sees this because this is technically a relic of Merlin and Roma, and it is considered to be a treasure throughout all of Otherworld. It is not something that should just be so simply cast away or destroyed or dismissed. But the truth of the matter is, Saturnine doesn't really care about the amulet. She doesn't care about it at all, because at the end of the day, she determines who will become Captain Britain. Merlin and Roma are no longer the only ones who get to choose who are going to be Captain Britain. The Starlight Citadel is hers, and that she rose up through the ranks and she became the ruler of the Citadel, and thus she can choose, and she chooses Brian Braddock. Now, there's some very interesting imagery here as they sit in Saturnyne's bedchamber, her sitting in this pool of watery goodness and pulling a starlight sword out of it, which, by the way, I want to say, I think I made a good call. Back in the video for 10 of Swords creation number 1, I did posit that I felt that the Starlight Sword must be something that is forged from the Starlight Citadel itself, and wouldn't you know who won the pony? Just so happens she says it herself, a blade forged from its very walls. And then we go back to this whole water thing. Yeah, hey, if you know, you know. That's all I'm saying. But yeah, at the end of it all, Saturnine wants the deed. She wants to seal the deal for the Starlight Sword by making Brian not only her Captain Britain, but also making him her personal round-the-clock 24/7 365 D appointment. And Brian surprisingly goes for it. He literally just leans into it. He's like, all right, cool. I guess if she's going to be throwing WAP down both pants legs, all I can do is take it. However, I do find it interesting that when she drops the sword, we discover that Betsy, who Saturnine had imprisoned earlier, has gotten free thanks to Jamie. And she slides in while she's distracted and picks up the Starlight Sword, reclaiming her identity as Captain Britain. Now, this is interesting because we learned too that Brian was in on the whole thing. He was fully aware that this was happening. He knew that Jamie and Betsy were going to get out, and he knew that they were going to come save the day. Why did he feel that way? Because this was technically all a ruse. I would even go as far as to say that this was planned even from the jump, even the rift between them, even the show that they put on in front of Saturnine, making her think that they were at odds. They weren't. This was actually completely planned out. Betsy even says so. She knew that she would put the sword in the one place that only one other person would be allowed to go, and that would be her bedchamber, and that person being Brian Braddock. At the end of it all, Brian doesn't want to become Captain Britain again. He says he is in fact Captain Avalon, that he has in fact decided to defend his brother's lands now that he is the King of Avalon. He even says that it's a role that means more to him than any that Saturnine could offer. Not only that, he's a married man, and of course we know married men don't cheat.
Message!
And with the Starlight Sword and the Sword of Might in hand, walking back through the Krakoan gates, that literally leaves them with 3 swords left to collect, which, to be fair, I can go ahead and tell you right now, they're a lot closer to having those last 3 swords by the time of the next issue than I think a lot of us may have even been prepared for. As far as Excalibur goes, one of the things I really appreciate is the fact that, especially when we first started off this whole thing with, Excalibur, Betsy taking up the helm as leader of the team, I do appreciate here is a kind of a call back to that, in the fact that, Brian wasn't necessarily dismissive of Krakoa, and he actually kind of encouraged her to go, but it was one of those situations where I kind of feel like, as a Captain Britain, his loyalty is to England and Otherworld, and I love the fact that in this, now that he is Captain Avalon and Betsy is Captain Britain, where Brian says for Queen and Country, and Betsy replies, mine and yours, and he simply replies, mine and yours. Basically letting us know that he is aligning his cause with that of Krakoa's, that the fate of the world is more important than a land that someone is sworn to protect. I was really here for it. I really liked this issue. It was really nice knowing by the end of this issue that, Betsy wasn't being as much of a petulant child as, we initially thought. This was pretty much all a ruse, because I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't a fan of seeing Betsy act like a petulant child over this whole who's gonna be Captain Britain bit. I actually prefer the fact that it was all just a game. A game was the foot, and they basically just played Saturnine right into their hands. Also, there's a little tip in this book too before we jump out of this one. The fact that they point out that the Sword of Might may just be from Galador, which would just make this all the more interesting. We know that we have, the whole Rom the Space Knight connection with Cable and him wielding the Light of Galador, which, is one of those things. Like, Galador is starting to factor more into more of the Marvel Comics universe, especially in the X-Men corner thing. So I'm very curious to see where that goes from there, if that's even going to be addressed or if it's just some kind of throwaway line they just throw in there just to make you go, ooh, look what they did there. I'm hoping that that's not the case, but just the same, I'm glad to see that the Starlight Sword has finally been accounted for. That means all we need to do is to collect the Scarab and the Grass Cutter and the God Killer, which I'm pretty sure Gorgon already has the God Killer. All he needs to do is just collect the Grass Cutter, and of course, Apocalypse must take up his Scarab, which we will talk about in the next video. That said, thank you for watching, and let me know what you thought about Excalibur number 13 by Tini Howard and RB Silva. Wash your damn hands and sound off in the comments. So hey, you made it to the end of the video. Awesome for you. If you enjoyed this video, and if you made it this far, I don't see how you didn't, do me a favor. Hulk smash that like button. And if you want to see more awesome videos like this one, make sure you click subscribe so you can become one of Earth's mightiest subscribers, and tap that bell so you know when I post up. Also, feel free to go check out my Patreon, where if you chuck in $1, you can get early access to most of my videos up to a week early. And if you have time, make sure you swing by nerd901.com, where you can find more of my content as well as other amazing stuff. Anyways, until next time, I love you 3000 plus Ultra!